Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Spotcast. I'm Tim Mitra and I'm joined by Jaime Lopez Jr.
How's it going?
All right. Now we probably should start telling people that I'm in Toronto and you're in Seattle just so they get some context in terms of how far apart we are and all that kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
I don't know. Anyway, so I was talking to my stepson Jonathan Kuline about the show and he was telling me about a podcast that he listens to where they have a couple of guys talking about, technology or whatever or content or, and quoting things from the web or whatever, and instead of having people yelling at their phones like we like to do on our other podcast, what they do is they have their producer fact check all of their things that they say during the show, and then at the end of the show he kind of beeps in and goes, guys, such and such wrong, such and such never happened, such and such. Anyway, so Jonathan has offered to fact check our shows for us. So now I don't know if he's going to do that like in an audio format or in a written format. I said he could just write it into the comment section on the website, and we'll read out his comments on subsequent shows. So what do you think about that?
I think that's perfect because, something like a Star Trek is definitely going to be something that will cause that, right? There's tons of stuff you'll see of like, well, actually, this person said such and such, or it was rather embarrassing in the other episode where just in my head, I had Millennium, totally different sci-fi show in my...
Oh, then Continuum, yeah.
I was thinking of Continuum, but they had the title Millennium. It was something, right? Aluminium, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So there were so many things that as I listened to the show, I was thinking the same sort of thing. Like I kept thinking, and I probably should have made notes on what I should correct on myself because I did make a few mistakes myself. I always forget names and people and stuff, and I say, I'm going to tell you something in a minute, and then I just don't get around to telling you it. So those are kind of things that get missed. I'm sure people will notice, and hopefully they'll write comments and put Ask Spotcast in them and stuff like that, right? So which would be good. So okay, so should we do the 2 follow-up pieces, or let's do the 2 follow-up pieces?
Sounds good,
right? Okay, so here's an example of the thing. You mentioned Lurch, right? And I immediately, in my mind, I saw the Lurch from the 60s Addams Family TV show with because we were just talking about John Aston as well, I think, right? Who played Gomez Addams, or a little bit later, I guess. The guy who played Lurch in my Lurch, in other words, is not the same as your Lurch. And my Lurch, Ted Cassidy, also played all the sort of monsters in a lot of 60s TV shows, including Star Trek, like in the I forgot the name of the episode where Kirk and Nurse Chapel beam down to the planet and she sees her old boyfriend there, and he's got this big android guy. Well, that's the guy who plays Lurch. He played a lot of these sort of big, tall, huge guys. I think he was like probably 7 foot or whatever. But that's my Lurch, and your Lurch is a completely different guy, Mr. Han, as you said, I think, right, on The Next Generation?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so... and
it was kind of both correct. Like, he is, in fact, a Lurch from The Addams Family TV series. Of course, it's the 1991 series that...
Was it on TV or was it a movie?
Maybe it was a movie. Maybe it was the movie. Sorry. I thought there was like a revival series.
There might have been... Yeah, that you say that. It might have been a TV show. No, but I remember, was it Christina... who played Wednesday Addams? I've forgotten her name. Christina something.
Christina Ricci was definitely in the movie, right. But I could have sworn there was like an Addams Family, because they did that a lot in that 70s and 80s sort of 60s, 70s, 80s time period of like this was the original, and then now we're doing some revival type stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But maybe they never actually did that on the Addams Family. That might be one of those things to fact check too. So
yeah, no. Well, so I think from what I remember, there was 2 Addams Family movies. There was one called Family Values, where I think Joan Cusack tries to marry Uncle Fester, who was played by Doc Brown from, because I can't remember his name, from Back to the Future. What's his name?
That's right. Christopher Lloyd is who you're thinking of.
Christopher Lloyd, yeah. Not to be confused with Chris Lloyd, Pyknoid, who's the director guy or producer guy, right? I always got those two mixed up. I didn't realize they were different people. So it's kind of weird that, like, again, and this also shows the difference in our ages too, because like, we talked about last week, my Star Trek is the 60s Star Trek and your Star Trek is the Next Generation, because you were a kid when that came out, right?
That's right.
So, so it's funny how these things happen. Well, it reminds me of a story, and I'm sorry to my, former sister-in-law, Jennifer, who once told my ex-wife that, you got to hear this band who put up this album called The Wall to us in like, in the early 80s, because as if we'd never heard of Pink Floyd before, sort of thing, right?
Right.
Anyway.
I mean, as a slight tangent, you see people doing that nowadays where Kanye West and Paul McCartney did some sort of collaboration, and it escapes me as to what that was. And, millennial and younger kids were like, holy smokes, like, this will be really good for this Paul McCartney dude. I'm like, what? It's like, this is one of the all-time greats. Like, if you were to like fling another golden disc out into space again and say, all right, let's see if any aliens find that, you would definitely have Beatles and Paul McCartney content on that disc, right? Like, you may or may not put Kanye on there.
Yeah. Well, Kanye's an interesting character. I don't really listen to his stuff and never really been a fan of his, but yeah, he certainly gets around, especially now that he's married to a Kardashian too, right? So that can't hurt.
Yeah, definitely. It's a definite power couple there.
Yeah. So did you have a chance to look at this Elaan of Troyius comparison that I put up?
I did. It's about 9.5 minutes of selected clips where they show the side by side of the original series as it was presented, presumably on TV, and then the what would you call it? HDification? No,
HD version for sure. Yeah,
or perhaps more accurately, like the special edition. If you think of like the Star Wars special edition trilogy,
exactly,
like that's kind of what it felt like to me.
Well, because to me, like, I get that everybody wants higher res images and stuff like that, but even watching and I think you said you hadn't seen any of these ones where they've redone the graphics on the original Star Trek series and for high def TV, right? It's still 4:3. They haven't stretched it out or whatever. Thankfully, they haven't tried to crop it to make it 16:9. But they've taken out the spaceship, which actually just for the 50th anniversary last year they reassembled for the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, right? Because I remember, again, when I was like probably 7 or 8, maybe 9, we went to Washington for a trip. Actually, what year did Watergate break? That was 73, maybe, That was
before I existed, and I don't remember off the top of my head. It was definitely in that 60s, 70s time frame.
So here's a weird thing. Like Watergate dominated our TV lives in mid to late 70s, whenever Watergate was on TV. It was on TV for like years, right? Like, you have no idea how horrible it was, because my dad would, monopolize the living room and just watch these, this live, I guess history being made kind of thing of this president being impeached. But we were actually in Washington, D.C. the weekend that Watergate broke. My sister just reminded me of that, like the other day. I never really made the connection. I guess it was off in the fog being a kid, right? But yeah, that's kind of our connection to Watergate. But anyway, so coming back to the Smithsonian, I remember seeing Alice Cooper's, leopard or snakeskin boots in like some exhibit. And as well, they also had the fully constructed model of the Starship Enterprise from the TV show. Like, it was like 6 or 8 feet long, right? Mm-hmm. And when we did our WDevCon in 2015, and we were back down in Alexandria, and we went to the Smithsonian to sort of wander around, and got to see all the space stuff. If you're into space junk, go to the Smithsonian or go to Dulles Airport, because like Dulles Airport has the shuttle Discovery, and the Smithsonian has one of the LEMs that they didn't use to go to the moon, because they canceled the program after the 17th, after Apollo 17. So they have one of the LEMs there, like an actual lunar. You can see like it's made of tinfoil. It is actually tinfoil. Looks really thin and really rickety, and you're like put together with like a rivet gun by your uncle in the backyard kind of thing. That's how it looks, right? But they went to space with this, right? And they have like all the capsules. They have the Mercury capsules. They have like the spacesuits that the guys came back from Earth with. And the thing about the Smithsonian is when they put these things in the museum, they don't clean them up, right? So if you see Dave Scott's uniform or outfit on the moon, and his boots and his gloves, or even Gene Cernan's boots and his gloves, they still have the moon dust on them. Like, they didn't clean them up to put them in the exhibit, right? And in fact, the story is that when they landed the shuttle and they decommissioned the shuttle Discovery, and they were going to bring it over to the Smithsonian. They said, "Do you want us to put it through the car wash or whatever, like the space shuttle car wash or whatever?" And the woman who runs the museum, I forget what the terminology is for her, but she said, no, just bring it over as it is. And I swear, when you go into that room where the space shuttle is, you smell the ship. It's kind of one of those things, like it's not enough to just see it in photographs, but to actually be in the room with it and see that it's just made out of like canvas and, ceramic tile. It's like, how can these people risk their lives and go up into space and this stuff? Which in context is kind of funny when you see like things like Star Trek and the shuttle Galileo and all that kind of stuff, and how clean and pristine they look on TV, right? So right. So that's cool. So anyway, so this getting back to what we were talking about, the Elaan of Troyius YouTube comparison. It's like side by side, and I like I said, I don't know if you watched any of it, but there were some parts where they were showing like the actors interacting with each other, and they had the side by side, and I couldn't tell any difference. I don't know about you, right? But of course I could tell when the model was being shot, right? So because like the way they did the globes, to represent the planets, and the way they had the space shuttle, or it's not a space shuttle, sort of the Enterprise sliding in and out of the shot or moving in and out of the shot. They obviously moved the cameras like they did in subsequent things like Star Wars, but it wasn't as sophisticated as Star Wars, right? Mm-hmm. But it was of the time. It was of its time. I mean, and again, I really object to them going in and getting rid of all that really cool footage that these people shot, right?
Yeah. So when I watched this, and I looked very closely at the side-by-side comparisons. Now, granted, I feel differently. I don't necessarily disagree with it on principle, like as an artist, which I know is something that has a bit of flavor you have. For me, I think some of the disagreement I had with it was there were cases where either the model, the CGI model, funny enough, didn't look as good as the 60s physical model. Like there were some shots where I was like, yeah, like the physical model, like it's more convincing in some of the shots that they showed because it was actually there, right? It's all lit correctly. Now, granted, there are some parts where the CGI model looks better because sometimes it looks like they didn't composite the original model too well. It looks like they just cut it out on a piece of paper and slapped it on the camera. So it's sort of like 50-50 in my head. Like there were some cases where I said, well, not only did you replace the physical model with a digital model for some of the shots, but you also changed the composition of the shot. And sometimes in cases that they showed on the YouTube clips here, I didn't agree with the flavor that was imparted. It kind of felt like it changed some of the scenes, like the scene where they're being sort of chased by a Klingon cruiser felt way different just because of some of the angles that they decided to choose. For the ships were way more menacing in that particular instance, and they were like tiny little nothings in the high res version, right, or the CGI version. Yeah, and even in cases where it wasn't quite what you're talking about there, like in some of the other shots that are coming to mind, they had much closer bits of shots of the cruiser. It felt like it didn't quite fit with what we were being shown, where in the original 60s, they kept reusing that same shot of the cruiser at just kind of like a distance on the view screen. Yeah. But it seems menacing of like, holy smokes, like these dudes are following us, right? This is like a completely different movie if it was like a film noir movie of like a detective, like he's like, hey, is somebody following me? Is this car tailing me? I need to lose this tail, right? Like that's sort of what I felt from the 60s version that I think was kind of lost when they decided to go with the technical aspects of the upgraded version. Right. Well, I mean, it could be, I don't know anything about the production stuff because Jonathan actually has the box set. I should probably borrow it from him, but I mean, of the redone, the new improved version, the next, what are you calling it? Special edition, right? But like, I've been watching watching the show on Netflix, and they've also changed the audio channel, right? So when Kirk comes on and says, these are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise, 5-year mission, blah, 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 it's really tinny and really small. Like they've made it like, it's not like, it's like the volume's like kind of really reduced, Mm-hmm. So it's just an odd, and like you said, there's some things that they just went way too far with in terms of, I mean, it's okay, like subtle differences, like they kind of matching the shots side by side, but in some cases they just went over the top. I mean, it's like you don't go back to 2001: A Space Odyssey and reshoot all those shots because we have better technology now, right? Again,
I guess that's the same argument I have with the Star Wars redo, right?
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me started on Han Solo stepping on Jabba the Hutt's tail. That's another one. Yeah, so anyway, it's cool side by side. We'll put this in the show notes for people if they want to have a look at this Elaan of Troyius. It's pretty long. It's like 10 minutes long, right? But actually, here's the thing. I don't know if you can do this. I was trying to freeze it here. For me, like, because I watched this show so often as a kid, just trying to find a frame here. Like, I don't know if you can pause the thing and go frame by frame. Because when it says, starring Leonard Nimoy and starring William Shatner, and they had the ship kind of come sort of whipping across the screen. It goes to the right first and then to the left first and to the right. And of course, in the CG version, they've got like a beautiful ship going by, right? But I remember watching this when I was a kid, and it kind of sort of bothered me, but now I kind of miss it. Is the motion blurred ship going by, and I'm sure they didn't film it. Like they probably made it into a matte painting or something like that, and zoomed in on the matte painting with a camera to make the effect of it coming towards you, right? Which is kind of how if you look at some of the stuff in Space 2001: Space Odyssey, they did that as well. Like they didn't actually have a model; they actually had a cardboard cutout of the model, and they moved it towards the camera really quickly, right? Mm-hmm. But this motion blurred ship. I wish I could freeze a frame here. Yeah, it's like I remember the odd shape of that. Again, that's my artist's eye sort of seeing it too, I guess, right? The odd shape of the ship as it was motion blurred and moving towards, and using the camera trick to make it look like it's moving towards you, right? Just another small little minor thing. I'm sure people are telling me to shut up on the podcast now. Shut up! Move on! Anyway, so that's my thing. You got anything else to say about the Star Trek redos?
No, I think it's something that people should check out. And I think, as we mentioned, probably maybe in the preview episode, I think if somebody was going to offer this, like if you're Netflix or if you're Amazon Prime Video streaming, just give people an option, right? Like there's plenty of space here. It's not like, well, we got to make two different discs. It's like, well, clearly there are people who want to see the original untouched version, and there are people who want to see, I can't stand these 60s effects. I want something that's kind of in between. So just give people an option, right? Just like the Halo video game that I mentioned, where they did like a 10th anniversary edition that let you view it in HD high-res graphics and textures, and also in the original low-res graphics and textures, for people who had the nostalgia for it.
Yeah, I guess I don't really have a right to complain, because like I have like the Lara Croft, Tomb Raider series that they redid. They re-rendered them for the PlayStation 4. I actually haven't gone through the games, because I really don't want to play the games again. But apparently they went back and they re-resed them up for the better engine, right? And so I have those games, so I really can't complain. But so I guess the Orville came out on Sunday too, right? That's the new Seth MacFarlane vehicle, or his sci-fi adventures, I guess. Now my initial gut impression of the Orville, having just seen it on, I actually had to stream it because I missed my PVR didn't tape it for some reason twice. It's kind of like, hey, I have a whole lot of money, let me make a Star Trek thing that I can be the star of. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's an interesting sort of note to have, because the way that Fox promoted this show, I went into the first episode thinking, oh, this is going to be like Galaxy Quest, which has been rumored to be, that they're going to make a TV series of that. I was like, oh, somebody beat him to the punch and they just couldn't get the licensing, or didn't want to pay for the licensing, and let's make our own thing and go with that. And then I watched the show. I'm like, wait, this is actually more of a dramedy, if anything. Like, it's actually some serious sci-fi episode stuff with a little bit of sprinkling of Family Guy sort of humor here and there.
Yeah, it's situation comedy for sure. Yeah. Very, very. And then, like, it's kind of funny because it's like a sitcom in some cases, like him and his ex-wife and stuff, right? Spoilers for you if you haven't seen it, but it's kind of his. I think the setup of the show is that his ex-wife is going to be his first officer, right? And how that kind of happened, and then his relationship with his best friend, who's like a real has no filters, right? Like, he's the kind of guy that just does stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And and there's sort of a couple of weird characters in it, and I mean, there's some funny bits, some cool technology, but the effects are like way over the top for. I mean, like, I guess now that we can do the effects the way we can do them, they're super duper good, right? Like, they've got the whole Jetsons thing going on. They got 2001. They have all the symmetry and everything's perfectly clean. There's no dirt on this in this universe that these guys live in, right? It's a little too polished, right? In terms of the special effects. I mean, and sometimes they're just special effects for the sake of special effects, right?
Yeah, I mean, all right. So I know you mentioned it slightly before, but I think it'll be a lot easier for us to cover this episode if we just say, hey, look, if you haven't seen the first episode of the Orville, well, this is your spoiler warning here, and if you want to pause and come back, by all means. So watching the episode, I think some of the early stuff was a little too clean. Like, when he's, I don't know, commuting his way home and finds his wife, his then wife, in bed with a blue alien. That part looked a little too clean, but then there were other parts that I was like, no, I totally get this, right? This is what Star Trek would be like in terms of filmography and the set design and everything if it was made today instead of the 1960s, right? Because they had a lot of clean and sort of minimalist retro sort of design back then.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was budget, though, that they did that the way they did. Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, Star Trek was sort of its time was very sort of modern and whatever. But yeah, I mean, and it's funny. Like I said, I last week I always watch TV shows and stuff like that if I'm interested in them with my IMDb app. And of course, so on some of the episodes I watched, I actually pulled out the notes on that and looked at the trivia notes and about how they made the costumes and stuff like that. And apparently the tunics that they wore were made in a sweatshop because they were done like overnight because they had no budget and they had to get them done real quick. So they had somebody do them like a 24-hour rush job kind of thing. Right. But yeah, so I mean they're passable. I mean, my wife does costume making for a living, and I remember thinking like, when I go to Fan Expo and stuff like that, some of the things that these kids make to make their costumes, like they're doing like a stormtrooper or they're doing like Queen Amidala or whatever. But I saw this Star Wars exhibition in Seattle when I was there in 2011, I guess, and I purposely went up and took close-up photos of these things for my wife because she's interested in this kind of stuff. And like they had a snowtrooper from the Battle on Hoth, right? And he's like wearing a cotton work glove that you can get at the Home Hardware or the local hardware store. What's Ace Hardware? What do you have in the States?
We also have Ace Hardware as well.
Yeah, we don't have Ace here. That's why I'm trying to find a name that fits in your context, right? Like
the Home Depot. Perhaps you guys have the Home Depot or Lowe's.
Yeah, we have the Home Depot. Yeah, the Home Depot. Yeah, we have that, and Lowe's. We have Lowe's as well. Yeah, now too. But just like the cheap little cotton, $1.99 work glove, or like there's a brand of boots like I think they're called Cougar. They used to make work boots, but they also got into making this cowboy style boot. And basically what they were is the snowtrooper was wearing these boots, but they had been dyed white, which is something my wife does all the time. And if you look at the flourishes on their uniforms, like their official tunics and stuff like that, they've got like these gold brand, sort of like gold I don't know what you call them, like insignia on their shoulders, right? And on a 60s television, they look pretty cool. They've got the glitter and the whatever. But then you see them in high res, and it's just like, oh, it's something somebody could have just whipped up on a sewing machine kind of thing, right? Like when you see them in the high res of today, like I'm sure the comm badges in Discovery, Star Trek Discovery, are going to be like super polished, and I put a picture up on the website of some mock-ups of them, right? Whereas in the 60s, they were like made with, they were just embroidered onto the shirts with a machine and just like made out of thread kind of thing, right? So like a patch, like a patch, yeah, like like a patch you'd sew onto your jean jacket or something like that, right?
Sure, or like a high school varsity letterman's jacket that you might have that same kind of patch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean like real low budget, like and so it's funny that when you look in bringing this back around is when I go to Fan Expo and I see these kids in these homemade uniforms that they've made up for themselves. They're as close to the actual ones that were used on the show as they need to be, right? So that said, one of the exhibits at Fan Expo was all the costumes that the actors actually wore for the new Thor Ragnarok movie coming out, right? And they look like super tight and all made to within an inch of their lives kind of thing. Like the helmets are 3D printed, but you couldn't tell that they weren't 3D, like they weren't properly handcrafted by what do they have up in Valhalla? Valhallan craftsmen or whatever, right? Yeah. Made in the forges of Thor, kind of thing. Anyway, that's yeah. So let's break down the show then if we're going to do that, right? Mm-hmm, so we had the scene, we had the opening piece where he finds out apparently he just goes and bums around for a year, and he's was a promising young guy and should have his own ship or whatever, and then the little things like well, how many ships are you outfitting? Oh, we're outfitting 3,000, and we decided that you were the bottom of the barrel guy we're going to put on into give you one of the ships, right? So he's kind of low in the I guess in the count of 3,000 potential captains, right?
Right. So that's sort of the premise that the admiral gives to him, and that'll be important because again, the spoiler warning. This will come back later in the episode, but that was how it's presented to him. Is like, look, man, like we're giving you a chance, largely because we got to put butts in seats. Somebody has to captain it, right? Yeah, exactly. It was like not like, oh wow, you did such a prestigious job. It was more like, yeah, this is kind of like your last chance.
Yeah, that's Victor Garber too, isn't it? The guy from Buffy.
That's correct. That is Victor Garber as Admiral Helsley, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we have TIFF here in Toronto right now, the Toronto International Film Festival, and where they on King Street where they do the TIFF, we have our Canada's Walk of Fame, and I actually saw his star on the Walk of Fame a couple of days ago when I was going down to see Greg talk, right? So Victor Garber has his star on the Canadian Hall of Fame. What do you know?
Yeah.
So so the ex-wife is an actress. She was on Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I guess she got killed off.
I only saw the first season and I don't recall her character off the top of my head. But Adrienne Lee Palicki is who that actress is, and she plays what is her character name? Kelly Grayson, the first officer, or XO as they tend to say on the show, of the Orville, and Ed Mercer, Seth MacFarlane's character's ex-wife.
Right. Yeah.
So the first 20-ish minutes are probably them setting up, like introducing the different characters, including the captain coming to the ship and meeting with the staff and finding out who they are, and giving sort of like a little short blurb of what their job role is and some sort of quirky thing about them.
Yeah, and they have characters that represent almost like the next generation, because they got the number one, and they've got the captain. They have the guy who's from a planet where they're mechanoids, right? So he's the Data character, I guess, right? They have the other guy who's from the planet where he's not. They're sexless, so all the people on the planet are male, and he's like the Worf character, I guess, right?
Yeah, that'd be Peter Macon as Lieutenant Commander Bordus, who plays a pretty heavy role in the first episode.
Yeah, and then the heavy as in terms of like size or strengths or whatever? Or?
They didn't really present that, other than, he's a reasonably large, imposing individual, and his makeup makes him look sort of beefy, bigger, stocky, tough, like a Lieutenant Commander Worf from TNG.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they have the lady who's the 26-year-old lady who's apparently an alien lady who is, I guess, a security officer, and that's sort of the Tasha Yar character, right?
Yeah, that was interesting to sort of both be an homage to, Tasha Yar, the original security officer on TNG, played by Denise Crosby, who's not exactly like the biggest sort of woman. She's not the size of China, the wrestler, for example. Right. And it was interesting that they chose somebody like that, with the premise being that she's from a high gravity planet. So when she's on Earth style stuff, she can do, very strong things, because her muscles are meant for, they didn't specify, but let's pretend it's like 10x gravity or something. Or maybe they did say, and that might be something to fact check.
I think that was what she said. I think the fact that their gravity is so high or whatever, that she's a superhuman in a regular type gallery, or like a class M gravity, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I meant to say, yeah. So and then the story continues, and they have some adventure, and they fly down to a planet where they've invented a time ray or time bubble, where objects in the bubble, and of course they do the typical Family Guy type of humor about it. Oh, that's really impressive, does it work with other fruit,
Right, where they age a banana like a month or something, so it becomes this disgusting rotted mess. Yeah.
And the lady scientist ends up in it, and she ends up aging 100 years or something, and dies, right? So
right.
And then they introduced the protagonist, which is, what are they called again? They reminded me of the
do you mean the antagonists? The Krill?
Yeah.
The
Krill.
Species,
was Krill what they called them in Galaxy Quest?
I think it might have been something similar, and they definitely had that sort of flavor to them. They weren't quite as, I don't know, reptilian looking and kind of swampy looking as the antagonists from Galaxy Quest are. But you can sort of tell that there were, even their spaceship design kind of reminds me a lot of that. So an homage is what I'll call it in that circumstance.
Yeah, and they have the same sort of like, I guess they have the same hiring criteria for the Krill army guys who are firing firing, laser rifles at our crew as they run towards their space shuttle, because none of them can hit a target, right? Just like the guys in Star Wars, right? And yet, our heroes can, nail them every time they fire off a shot, right? So, yeah, typical sci-fi bent, as it were. Yeah. So, what did you think? Like, if you had only ever seen this one show and you weren't planning on watching any more, would you continue to watching the series, or would you just sort of put it on the back burner and think, well, maybe I'll wait for it to come back to syndication or something? What do you think?
So that's interesting, because let me explain some of my answers. So normally I give a show that I'm going to try watching 2 or 3 episodes, because I feel like the first episode for sure, and potentially the second episode, are kind of like the extended pilot piece where they're setting up the premise. And by the third episode, I expect to see some real promises. Like, all right, what is this show going to be like? Is it going to be worth watching? And so it's kind of hard to tell just from one episode. And as I mentioned earlier, I came in thinking it was going to be Galaxy Quest, and it's kind of more like Firefly, if you ask me, where it's serious drama, but actually pretty funny too, is the intent. However, I do think they nailed the drama side of this aspect, but I feel like they need to up their game for the comedy aspect of the dramedy duology.
Right. So would you watch it again?
I think I will. I think I will watch the next episode and hope that they repair some of that, right? Because here's how I think I would have presented it if I was Fox. Like, I understand why Fox decided to go with the comedy side, but it also sort of kept me sort of off kilter for parts of the episode until I sort of absorbed it a little bit. I view it as, imagine if you had the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation, but instead of being, hoity-toity, white-collar, this is our noble mission sort of folks, imagine if they were normal, blue-collar, everyday people. And what would that work environment be like? Where, we're in space, we're exploring that sort of, but it's still a job to them, right? Like, the one navigator, what is his name? John Lamar, right? The first thing he asks the captain, which was played for comedy, was, the other captain used to let us have soda pop, while I'm working. Can I continue to do that? Like, is that still okay? Sure. Yeah. Whatever. Fine. Right. Like, if you've ever gotten a new manager at your job and you've had that initial thing, like that's the dumb kind of thing that people actually worry about and ask about, right? Like, that's like legitimate everyday job stuff that would never have shown up on The Next Generation. So I think I would have presented this as like, what if the everyday guy and gal were in space? And let's watch what that is.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. That happens to me all the time at work. I asked somebody about, I wanted to look at a document that he'd created and sort of said, hey, can you send me a link to that document on the wiki that you created? And he's like, yeah, well, I never got around to finishing the stuff and whatever. And I'm like, look, dude, I just want to copy your style. I don't care what the content is. I just want to see what bits and pieces you used so I can copy you, right? He's like, oh, okay, no problem. But like, he's getting very sort of defensive about, why am I asking this question? Like, you sort of have to, you have to sort of say, yeah, you're totally right about this whole thing. And then what the other guy says, can I wear shorts now? Right. And the answer was still no. Yeah. So it's an interesting show. I think it's, for as special effects goes, I think it's excellent, but over the top for the show. Do you watch, I was going to ask you, do you watch Family Guy or American Dad or anything like that, or at all?
Not religiously, but I have seen many of their episodes, and I'll watch it in the background of something, while I'm doing something else.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of easy to digest sort of comedy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a few things like that. Like, to be honest with you, I don't watch The Simpsons either. I watched them when they were, before they were The Simpsons, I watched them, and I watched maybe, I don't know, I don't even think I watched the first season. And they've been on for, 20 years now or something like that?
It's more than 25, I think. I think they crossed that threshold a few years ago. So it's the longest running animated TV series for sure, and probably close to the, if not the number one longest running show, period, right?
Well, you gotta watch some of those soap operas that have been running for a long, long time, right? So
it's categorization, like Days of Our Lives or something, like one of those older soap operas.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's kind of fun. This show's fun, but there are some other shows that I just won't miss, because like I find compared to like Dark Matter, for instance, this doesn't hold a candle. It's nowhere near compared to Firefly. Wash your mouth out, young man.
So that wasn't a quality comparison. That was a style, right? Like if you sit and watch an episode of Firefly and you start mapping out, where does this fall in the spectrum between pure drama and pure comedy? It definitely leans towards the comedy side, right? It's way funnier than any of the Star Trek series. Just pick one, and any even the fun, quote unquote funniest episodes, the ones that were played for laughs, never get to the intensity of humor and content that would go into a Firefly.
Right. You always had that sort of interplay between McCoy and Spock and stuff like that. But but in Firefly, like one thing about Firefly, it's interesting for me, being an outsider, is that it's very much like a Western. So there's that whole nostalgia for the American West, right? And then it's also got the fact that Malcolm was a brown coat, which was the team that the side in the war that lost. So there's that whole sort of Union versus the Confederate kind of vibe going there too. That sort of is an undercurrent in that particular show. There's nothing in the Orville that sort of it doesn't have any sort of like winning formula in that sense. Like it's nothing. It's too pretty in a lot of ways. The special effects are amazing. I mean, you could just watch those over and over again, but they don't add to the story per se, right? The ship's kind of weird. I like to see the fact that when at the end of the show, and again, spoilers for the people who haven't watched it yet, you're foolish for listening to us. But the fact that when they go back to the space dock at the end, the ship's all smashed up from the battle they had, right? So, which is kind of realistic, I suppose, right? Yeah. But I thought they were going to go real low with the scene where the shuttle is flying towards the spaceship, and they have to open the shuttle bay doors and capture this the shuttle, like because the spaceship itself is whipping around in a big giant circle. I thought they were going to get really crass there, but they didn't.
a rare sort of obvious opportunity that they decided not to take, and that was interesting. I wonder if there's a director's cut where they had an alternative view of that. Yeah.
Well, knowing Seth MacFarlane and his like irreverence for anything that like censors and stuff like that. Yeah, that might have been the censor's cut. Who knows? I mean, maybe we're completely wrong, but that was a total setup. Like if you'd seen the movie Ted, or you've seen the Family Guy or anything like that, like when they kind of they don't show stuff per se, but they don't hold bars. They certainly do imply that things happening in different scenes in that movie. And I haven't seen Ted 2, but I've seen Ted. I was actually surprised when I saw it. It was pretty good. So, but yeah. So and it's kind of, I think I'll give this a 7 maybe for this episode. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I feel that's fair. When I look at how did they do in terms of pilot episode, getting the premise out there, I think they did a reasonably good job. Passing grade, which a 7 out of 10, a 70% would be.
It's not bad. Yeah.
I think the thing I would have liked to see that they didn't do enough of is I wanted to see more of John Lamar, the navigator who asked about the soda pop, and I feel like they completely missed. And hopefully, episode 2 that comes out, the next week, I feel like they completely missed on giving us more for Isaac, the artificial life form. You mentioned Lieutenant Commander Data. He's kind of like Lieutenant Commander Data, but if he was intensely racist, which I think presents some opportunities because I've rewatched not every episode of the 7 seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I kind of went through and watched just the episodes that I knew were good. And there's plenty of occasions where I'm like, yeah, but the other people are intensely racist towards Data. Like, how does he put up with that?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
It's like if he wasn't, metal, and if you made him black or Asian or Indian or whatever, pick your particular minority, like nobody would think that was okay for people to do and say the things they say to him. So I think there's an opportunity to explore that with this character.
True. In reverse, because didn't they say that was one of his flaws? Is he comes from a planet where they look down on humans, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting thing to watch. Actually, one thing I want to comment on before we actually do go is that there was no transporter, right?
Dude, this is why I should have written some actual notes. You're right. I noticed that too. I'm like, wait, let's mention it next week, right? Let's write some notes here. Or do you want to talk about it now? Okay, we can talk about it. This is going to be some after show for the show.
Sure, yeah.
So if I understand the history correctly, the only reason there was a transporter in the original series was because they discovered it was too expensive to do a shuttlecraft shuttlecraft landing every time. So it's
right.
like, yeah, this kind of makes sense, right? And this show doesn't have that, right? Because they actually do have the money to show that shuttlecraft CGI thing going down and landing in some courtyard somewhere.
Right, but then again, they also had the Galileo 7 is, I think it's one of the episodes, probably like in the first 20, because I think I'm on episode 16 or 17 right now. So I want to say maybe it's episode 12 or 13 or somewhere in there is an episode called Galileo 7 where Spock and a bunch of other guys, they use the shuttlecraft and go down into this planet because of the atmosphere. They can't beam through. They can't see where the rocks or impediments are. So they get in the Star Trek shuttle and they go down. And interestingly enough, the AMC model makers, the company that makes models, AMC, right? They made the shuttlecraft for Star Trek. I guess that's where they got the money for it, right? They made it for them as long as they had the rights to make the model of the Galileo 7 shuttlecraft, right? Which is the name of the thing that gets destroyed at the end of that one. If you haven't seen that since the 60s, spoilers, shame on you. Yeah. So and going back to what we were saying earlier about the models, right? I think I had a Starship Enterprise model probably later, like after the show had been canceled. But while the show was still in the air, the only model I could get was the Klingon battlecruiser, which we were just talking about in the Elaan of Troyius episode, right? Mm-hmm. And that's for me, that was my first Star Trek model. So so I have a soft spot for that particular configuration of ship. I mean, I wasn't thrilled about the fact that I was just getting the lame old Klingon one, but it was better than nothing. But anyway, the point is those models were all made by AMC, and I'm pretty sure all the space, like the lunar module and all that kind of stuff, were also made by AMC as well. So yeah, interesting. So that's how they got the money to do it. But yeah, like no shuttle, no, and they didn't close the door to the ship when they got off the ship, which I found really weird too. Right? Like the door opened, they all walked off the ship, and they walked into the building and left the ship there with the door open. Like, what are they on a planet where there's no crime?
That is a common thing I think you could find in even becomes like the premise of a Star Trek: The Next Generation episode. I think. Yeah,
somebody must have what do you call it? When you stow away in the ship and then come up and wreak havoc and what have you, right? So
I mean, I think I'd be more afraid of vandalism because as we're recording this, the iPhone 10 was just not released. It was announced by Apple,
unveiled. Right.
So you can imagine that a shuttlecraft would require some sort of biometrics to say, oh yeah, this is part of the crew versus some random joker that's there on Nancroft 9 or something.
Right. And so and here's the thing too is like you just reminded me of something again. It's like no transporter thing. Did you notice that like nobody had? Oh no, I guess it did. Nobody had an iPhone 10. Nobody had an iPhone 10 in their hand on the stage, did they? Like when Craig Federighi was doing his demos, he was using an iPhone 8, right? No, it's not true. He was doing the face recognition thing, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends on which part of the keynote you're talking about.
At the very end there, where do you remember where he picked up the one phone and then, we'll cut this from this part of the show, but anyway, we'll say goodbye now for real. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about this on the other podcast, which is going to record in like a few minutes. So come on over, people. Come listen to the other podcast, More Than Just Code. You'll enjoy that one too. All right. So, and scene. All right, so how many more sleeps till Discovery comes out? It's not till next week, right?
It comes out
or even more.
Is it the 24th? I don't
24th.
Have a calendar.
I'm opening a calendar here. So we're the 13th today. 24th is a Sunday, right?
Yeah. So two more Sundays as of this recording.
Right. So we get one more Orville episode on the 17th, and then we get Happy Birthday to My Sister, by the way, on the 17th, and you get the Orville on the 24th, right? So hopefully people are listening to the show. They'll be getting it on the 16th, I hope, and they can listen to it after and fly right into the other one there, right? So just a quick note before we go. So I had to use Tunnel Bear to watch the Fox version because there was no Canadian rebroadcasting on any sort of inline thing that I could find. Oh, maybe it's on City. I should check there because it's on I think it was on City TV, and then like I said, I tried to PVR it again on Tuesday for some reason, and it didn't record. And maybe because it's on a TV channel that I have to pay for or something like that or whatever. Anyway, trials and tribulations. All right, Jaime, so if people want to get a hold of you on the internet, where would they look?
The best place is on Twitter. I am at @DevWithAHair.
All right, and I think I said before, I'm Tim Mitra. I'm in Toronto, Ontario. I can be found on Twitter as TIMMITRA, and that's it. And we'll see you guys in the future. Bye.
See you in the future. Bye-bye. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future. This was the JJ Abrams thing?
Yeah, so that's what I forgot I was going to mention earlier was that they just announced that today, or I guess yesterday, to 12th, that JJ Abrams is going to write and direct the last episode of Star Wars 9, I guess it is, right? Mm-hmm. Or IX, which would be pretty cool. So I guess Ron Howard's doing the current one, right?
I believe that's true for The Last Jedi. I think it was Ron Howard. I'd have to look it up, but
yeah.
I believe the previous director of Episode 9 was the director of Jurassic World. Is that correct?
You mean before Ron Howard?
No, for Episode 9. The one that JJ Abrams
you mean
is taking
somebody
over
else?
For.
Oh, he's out, is he? Okay, I don't know. Let's see, what is this?
Yeah, I think that's who it was. That might be one to fact check. But in either case, it's interesting that I guess there were creative differences between that director and Disney, and they decided to go in a different direction,
really?
And that's why they're bringing back JJ Abrams, who
the guy they
I
know,
think and I think he did a really good job with The Force Awakens. And I think the main concern that people have, and I think it's a fair criticism, is that even though I enjoyed the movie, you could tell that it stayed a little too close to A New Hope, right? It parallels that quite a bit. To the benefit, of course, of feeling like a real Star Wars movie that I think the prequels kind of suffer from, that they feel a little off. And I think a lot of the criticism that's come of this, choice for JJ Abrams to do Episode 9 is based on that. And I think it will be a different environment because I think the pressure was so intense with, this is the first Episode 7, The Force Awakens. That was the first Star Wars in like more than a decade. And they really, with all the money that Disney spent to acquire Star Wars from Lucas, I think they really wanted to make sure that they didn't drop the ball on it. And so I think they went just a little too safe, as opposed to like Rogue One, which was like the complete opposite, right? Like they didn't play it safe at all. That was actually like a pretty gutsy sort of movie for them to create. And so I believe that, yes, we will see JJ Abrams sort of isms, because he's got his own particular style for writing and directing. But I don't think that you will see a movie that's going to be quite as close to one of the other movies, because I don't think they will want to need to necessarily play as safe as they did with The Force Awakens. I think The Force Awakens is an altogether different beast in terms of the movie environment and business context that it was in versus Episode 9, which will be presumably riding the tails of a very successful Episode 8, which in turn was riding the tails of a very successful Episode 7.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like I know there was the sort of parallelism that happened between Force Awakens and A New Hope, and that has to do with, that's that thing we talked about with musical hooks and things like that, where you use things that people are comfortable with to create sort of familiarity with it, right? But the thing about it is that the reason why Star Wars itself, the first movie, works is because it sort of uses that Joseph Campbell myths and legends kind of story, right? Or type of theory where, like a lot of stories, like the story of Buddha and Alexander the Great and Jesus, they all sort of follow that same sort of thing. Harry Potter and A New Hope have a lot of parallels too. Like you could literally take the same plot points and just map them all out. And you do the same thing with Rey and her discovering the sword and her destiny and that kind of stuff. And so it was a familiar story. Like I know one friend of mine who has not seen Star Wars, and I asked him to go see Force Awakens without having seen any of the other movies and to tell me what he thought about it, right? But But yeah, so, and I think that the Empire Strikes Back is a different kind of movie than A New Hope in the same sense, right? So I think this second movie is going to be, it's sort of, like I said, tell me a different story is what I was saying before about rather than reworking or taking a new spin at an old tried and true successful story, right? So it's not like Force Awakens was like a remake of Star Wars, but then again, in some ways it was, right? Or retelling. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Like, I don't know. I'm hoping that Star Wars 8 hasn't got some sour spots or soft spots in it, right? And how are they going to end this saga? Really, is what the question in 9 is going to be, right? Like, where does it go? I mean, you would hope that, like, the whole promise of A New Hope is that, you know, this lost legendary Jedi Knight culture is going to somehow come back. I mean, but all we've got out of it so far is one guy, right? Whereas before in Revenge of the Sith, or even before that, there was a whole culture of Jedis. I mean, there was all those kids in training that, you know, Anakin dispatched, right, in the third movie. But yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, like, it's funny from the JJ Abrams point of view. It's going to be like, you know, I always joke about the fact there's going to be lots of lens flare and things like that,
right?
Because that's sort of his signature style, right? You know, his director trademarks. But yeah, it's interesting to see. I guess it's sort of it's a comfort thing too, right? Like, you know, not only comforting to Disney, but also comforting to me and to other Star Wars fans, it seems, right? Because I sort of caught a bit of the buzz about this earlier, because I remember seeing something about somebody asking JJ Abrams, you know, maybe at Comic-Con, if he was thinking of doing Star Wars, and he kind of like joked as if to say no, he's not, right? So
yeah, I think I mean, because it's a natural question. It's like, well, why didn't he just do all three? And I think he stated at some point that would have taken a lot out of him, right? Like, he put a lot into The Force Awakens, and so he like essentially wouldn't have survived. He probably would have burnt out if he had spent the next several years doing all of them. But now he's had a little bit of a break, so hopefully he's been refreshed. And coming out of The Force Awakens, it seemed like he was kind of missing that sort of opportunity to do another one. And I think this sort of fell into his lap based on Disney falling out with the other directors. So I think it's a win-win in that case.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny. I think I told you that at WWDC that he was doing the closing talk at the last time I was there in 2014, I think, right? When was the last there? Yeah, 2014. Was it 2014? Yeah, it must have been, because yeah, we were, that was the year you went in 2015, right?
Yeah, but I do remember seeing JJ Abrams. Are you sure it wasn't 2012? Was he there? Multiple times in the last several years?
I don't know about that, but he was definitely there it was the last, oh no, maybe it was the other guy. Maybe it was the guy who did Rebel. Yeah, no, it was the guy who did Star Wars Rebel was there in 2014. Yeah, no. Anyway, so he was up there talking about, and he had clips of some stuff he was working on. I can't remember if I don't think he was working on Star Wars at the time, because we would have mauled him, but, oh no, he was working on Star Trek, the redo of Star Trek at the time, right? With the new Christopher Pine and Zachary Quinto. Is that his name?
Yeah, but that was a movie for 2009. Was he doing Star Trek Into Darkness?
Oh, must have been, yeah, maybe with Benedict, the one with Benedict Cumberbatch, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the one? Yeah. Anyway, he was up there talking, and I remember at one point somebody asked him somebody said, "Can I ask a question about Lost?" And he just sort of said no, dropped the mic, and ran off the stage. Because I guess he doesn't want to answer questions about that. But and so that sort of humble comedic sort of side to him comes out in his work. I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes stuff on Force Awakens of him, creating the doing the calls and all that kind of stuff that directors do. Right?
No, I haven't. It sounds like I should.
Entertaining stuff. Entertaining stuff. Yeah, it's pretty funny. Because they talked to Simon Pegg about playing the guy he plays and all that kind of stuff, and about the when Harrison Ford and Chewbacca walk onto the set, kind of how the whole tempo changed for everybody, right? So so he's an interesting director. I'm not a big fan of all of his work. Like I said, I didn't really get into. I watched the first couple of episodes of Lost and never really got into it. And he's done. Didn't he do some? He did some of the Mission Impossibles too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Which one did he do? Was it like Ghost Protocol or something? Or
maybe, yeah. And his Bad Robot brand, that the stuff that he does under that, or the work that gets done on that brand is all really interesting stuff, really good entertaining stuff, right? So he seems to have a good pulse as an American director of what makes people happy to see, right? So that's the promise of having JJ Abrams Abrams directs Star Wars 9.
Right.
Or IX. Yeah, so that's it. That's all I want to say about JJ Abrams. That's pretty cool news.
Yeah, definitely.
So you were saying Disney's moving away from Netflix, or no, sorry, Disney's pulling their content off Netflix because they're going to go to their own thing,
would
right?
be somewhat misleading to call it pulling, because that kind of implies that they're breaking a contract or something. They're essentially not renewing a contract, which leaves the Star Wars series in limbo, because I think the contract ends before The Last Jedi would be available for streaming, and definitely leaves out whichever Marvel movies end up around the same time that the contract ends. So it's the sort of thing where, there's only so many different streaming providers. Well, let me back off. There are only so many different companies that could handle something like, can we create a streaming service that people will want to use, right? So to a lesser extent, Amazon and Netflix they're still largely providing streaming access to other people's stuff, right? They do have their own original content, don't get me wrong, but if you looked at the percentage-wise, even though it's a growing percentage, it's still a very small percentage, right? There are only a handful of shows and movies they have that are their own versus like the bazillion episodes of TNG and all these 70s things and, so on and so forth. And when you look at somebody like a Disney, they have essentially nothing but their own content. They have tons of content that people want to pay a premium for, right? There's, of course, the traditional Disney stuff, their movies and animation and everything else. They've got the Marvel series that they acquired. They've got Star Wars they've acquired. They have a lot of gems and jewels that they can use as incentive for people to subscribe to either yet another streaming service or to their streaming service in lieu of another one. So this will be an interesting battle, I think, to see how that sort of plays out.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to the Ron Howard version. I like Ron Howard's work too. So yeah, he's done some interesting work, like with the Backdraft and the
Apollo 13. I thought was what you were going to mention.
Apollo 13. Yeah, Apollo 13. Yeah, for sure. That's one of my keepers. I have a copy of that somewhere. And he's done some good stuff. So sure. All right. On that note, I guess we'll call it a day because it's again real late for me.
Yeah. All right. Have a good one.
Okay.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.